Young millionaire falls in love with a woman on the street. He took her home and got her pregnant. Sometimes fate manifests itself in the most unlikely places. It wasn't in a fancy restaurant or at a gala that Nathaniel Turner's life changed forever. It was on a cold night, on a forgotten corner of New York, when the gaze of a millionaire man crossed with that of a woman who had nowhere to sleep. If you like intense stories like this, leave your like and subscribe to follow every detail. Nathaniel Turner was only 29 years old and was already considered one of the most influential young people in the real estate industry in the United States. He had inherited a huge fortune after his father's early death, but he was not a lazy heir. On the contrary, from an early age, he had been involved in every project of the family company, Turner Properties, expanding business, buying historic buildings, and revitalizing entire neighborhoods of New York. In the eyes of the world, he was the portrait of American success. Young, rich, handsome, and with an open future in front of him. But in his heart, Nathaniel carried a void that no amount of money could fill. Gala parties, luxury cars, dinners in exclusive penthouses. All this seemed more like a theater set up to satisfy the expectations of others than to fulfill his own desires. Often, after closing millionaire contracts, he would return to his Manhattan apartment and feel alone, as if none of it really mattered. One winter night, after a long and exhausting meeting, Nathaniel decided not to return home immediately. He asked the driver to let him walk a few blocks alone, something he rarely did, since his social circle always preached the idea of safety and discretion. He just wanted to feel the icy wind on his face, observe the busy streets of the city that never sleeps, and, who knows, remember what it was like to live without so much spotlight on him. It was then, as he turned the corner of West 34th Street, that he saw her. A young woman huddled against the wall of a closed store, wrapped in a threadbare blanket, with a plastic bag next to her. Her brown hair fell in disheveled strands over her face, and her eyes, despite their tiredness, still retained a glow that contrasted with all the darkness around her. Nathaniel stopped without noticing. Something in that scene disarmed him. It was not just the image of someone homeless, but the strange feeling that this woman carried a story that no one had heard. He took a deep breath, approached slowly, and when the young woman raised her eyes, the impact was immediate. Behind the dirt on the face and the visible wear and tear, there was delicacy. There was dignity. "Are you okay?" he asked, in a soft voice that didn't match the businessman's firm posture he used in meetings. She stared at him for a few seconds, as if she didn't believe that someone like him was actually talking to her. He tightened the blanket around his body and replied, I'm trying." That simple answer penetrated deeply. Nathaniel, accustomed to people who always asked for something from him, investment, opportunity, favors, was surprised by the disarming sincerity of this woman who seemed to want nothing more than to endure one more night. He bent down a little to be at her height. "What's your name?" "Emily. Emily Carter." Nathaniel nodded slowly. He remained silent for a few moments, feeling that something inside him was moving, an impulse that did not come from reason, but from the heart. And for the first time in a long time, he didn't want to repress it. "Emily, if you trust me, I want to help you." She laughed humorlessly, a short, almost ironic laugh. People always say that. Then they disappear. Nathaniel shook his head. "I'm not going to disappear." There was firmness in her voice, but Emily remained suspicious. And rightly so. How many looks of contempt, how many empty promises, how many hands denied had she faced in the streets? Still, something about the man in the impeccable suit, standing in front of her, looked different. "What do you want from me?" he asked defensively. Nathaniel took a deep breath. "Nothing. I just want you not to have to spend another night out here." She watched him in silence, trying to decipher if it was true. Emily's heart was beating fast, torn between fear and an almost forgotten hope. Nathaniel, on the other hand, could not shake the feeling that this meeting was not just any coincidence. After a few seconds, which seemed eternal, Emily looked away from the floor, pressed the blanket to her chest, and said only, "If it's a lie, I won't take another disappointment." Nathaniel leaned slightly, and replied in a whisper, "I don't lie." And at that moment, without either of them noticing, something began to take shape. Something that would forever change the life of the young millionaire and the woman the world had forgotten. The silence between them was broken by the distant sound of a car passing through the wet street. Nathaniel stood up, took off the wool coat he wore under his overcoat, and held it out to Emily. She hesitated, as if the simple act of accepting a coat was a trap. But the cold was punishing, and his fingers were almost numb. "You," he said calmly, "at least until we get somewhere safe." Emily picked up the piece of clothing slowly, as if it were made of crystal. The immediate warmth of the wool enveloped her, and for the first time that night, she felt a hint of relief. Nathaniel gestured for him to accompany him. Emily looked down at her feet, remembering the worn-out shoes that barely protected her from the water pooling on the sidewalks. Still, she got up with effort and walked beside him. The driver, a middle-aged man named Richard, looked on in surprise when he saw Nathaniel approaching with a young woman clearly homeless. But, disciplined as he was, he just opened the car door. Emily stopped in front of the luxury vehicle, hesitating again. His eyes met Nathaniel's, and he just nodded. "Trust me." She took a deep breath and walked in. The journey to the condominium where Nathaniel lived was silent. Emily watched the city through the windows, the lights reflecting on the glass, the imposing buildings contrasting with the reality she knew from the streets. Her heart was tight. "What am I doing?" he thought, not knowing whether he should believe that elegant stranger who seemed so sure of his intentions. When they arrived at the Turner Tower, the huge building that bore Nathaniel's family surname, Emily felt her stomach churn. I had never even stepped foot in the lobby of a place like that. White marble gleamed on all sides. The central chandelier shone like a sky full of stars, and uniformed men took care of every detail. Glances fell on her immediately. Receptionists and security guards exchanged discreet looks of strangeness when they saw her enter next to the young heir. Emily lowered her head, curling up in Nathaniel's coat, as if she wanted to disappear. Nathaniel, however, walked steadily. The natural bearing of someone who was used to being watched made it impossible for her to go unnoticed. When they arrived at the private elevator, he entered the password and, only then, turned to her. "Don't worry about them. No one here will judge you with my presence." She let out a nervous laugh. "It's easy to say when you were born to live in this place." Nathaniel looked at her for a few seconds and, instead of answering, just opened the elevator door so that she could get in first. His apartment was on the 41st floor, a glass penthouse that offered a spectacular view of the city. Emily walked in slowly, almost misstepping on the soft carpet, as if she were making a mistake by walking through that door. The contrast was brutal. To her, accustomed to sleeping on cold sidewalks, that space seemed like another planet. Leather sofas, walls decorated with works of art, a kitchen equipped like the one she only saw in expensive store windows. "You can sit wherever you want," Nathaniel said, placing the keys on the coffee table. Emily remained near the door, not daring to move. "Why are you doing this?" he asked in a thin voice. "You don't even know me." Nathaniel took a deep breath. He walked to the window, looking at the illuminated city before answering. "Maybe because I know what it's like to feel like no one really cares." She watched him in silence. His sincerity disconcerted her. "But you have everything," he retorted. "Money, house, respect." Nathaniel turned slowly, his blue eyes reflecting an unexpected melancholy. "Everything, except someone who sees me beyond that." Emily lowered her eyes. Those words resonated deeply, because somehow she knew exactly what it meant to be invisible. Nathaniel approached, keeping a respectful distance. "You don't need to decide anything now. I just want you to sleep safely tonight. The guest room is ready. Tomorrow, if you want, you can leave." Emily stared at him, trying to detect some trace of lying. But he found nothing but a serene look. She took a deep breath, nodded her head, and murmured, "Thank you." That night, lying on a soft mattress for the first time in years, Emily cried silently. I didn't know if it was fear, gratitude, or exhaustion. I just knew that something had changed. And Nathaniel, alone in the living room, couldn't sleep either. He stared at the ceiling, wondering what exactly had caused him to stop on that corner that night. I felt that, somehow, Emily wasn't just someone who needed help. She was the missing piece of a puzzle that he didn't even know was incomplete. As the city outside went at its pace, two very different worlds had intersected, and nothing would ever be the same. The sun was streaming in through the large windows when Emily opened her eyes. It took him a few seconds to realize where he was. The room was large, decorated in neutral tones, with modern and delicate furniture. A vase of white lilies adorned the nightstand, and she wondered if that flower had always been there, or if Nathaniel had put it in after he had brought it in. He sat up slowly, still with the strange sensation of being out of his own body. The mattress was so soft that it seemed to swallow her. For a moment, he thought about simply getting up, walking out the door, and going back to the streets. But when she felt the woolen coat on her shoulders, the same one Nathaniel had given her the night before, she remembered his gaze, firm and sincere. The aroma of coffee guided her to the kitchen. Nathaniel was in a dress shirt, sleeves rolled up, stirring in a frying pan. He didn't look like the same man she'd seen in an impeccable suit downtown. "Good morning," he said, without turning. "I hope you slept well." Emily remained standing in the doorway, not knowing what to answer. Finally, he murmured, "Better than in recent years." Nathaniel smiled slightly, pouring scrambled eggs on a plate. He placed it on the bench and motioned for it to come closer. "Sit down." She obeyed, but kept her arms crossed, as if her body was still asking to protect itself. "You don't have to do that," Emily said suspiciously. "Giving me breakfast as if I were." "Like it was someone," Nathaniel added, looking directly at her. "Because you are." The words took her by surprise. Emily looked away, feeling the weight of years of being treated as invisible. As they ate, Nathaniel asked little, respecting her silence. With each bite, Emily remembered how many times she had fed only on leftovers and packages thrown into the city's dumpsters. That simple meal was of incalculable value to her. After breakfast, Nathaniel had to leave for a meeting. "I'll leave Richard down here," he explained. "If you need anything, he'll be available." Emily nodded, though she knew she wasn't going to ask for anything. When he left, he walked through the roof slowly, almost like an intruder. Every corner reflected a life far from hers. Books lined up on shelves, signed paintings, photographs of trips to countries she had only seen in magazines. In the bathroom, he looked at himself in the mirror. The reflection showed a haggard face, matted hair, eyes marked by exhaustion. She felt ashamed of herself. What did he see in me, she thought. It was at that moment that one of the cleaning employees entered the room without realizing that Emily was there. Her name was Martha, a woman in her 50s, with a stern look. When his eyes met Emily's, it froze. "Oh, sorry, I didn't know there was anyone here." Emily forced a shy smile. I'm passing through." Martha frowned, clearly intrigued, but said nothing more. He just left, closing the door slowly. Emily felt her heart race. It was evident that the employees would be surprised by his presence. After all, who was she? A friend? An acquaintance? Or something worse in their eyes? In the evening, Nathaniel returned to find Emily sitting on the couch, hugging her knees. "How was the day?" he asked, sitting down next to him. She shrugged. "Strange. I don't know if I should really be here." Nathaniel looked at her calmly. "I didn't bring you to be a burden, Emily. I brought it because I wanted to have a chance." "A chance for what?" she asked, almost in a tone of defiance. He was slow to respond. "To start over." Silence took over the room. Emily took a deep breath, trying to absorb those words. Recommence. To her, this idea seemed as distant as an impossible dream. In the following days, the coexistence became more intense. Nathaniel presented her with small comforts, new clothes, a hot shower, full meals. Emily, although grateful, always kept one foot behind, as if she did not want to be deceived. Gradually, however, something began to change. Nathaniel discovered in her a rare sensitivity. Emily knew how to listen, knew how to be silent at the right moments, and spoke with an honesty that he could not find in anyone else in his circle. She didn't try to impress him. She didn't ask for anything in return. She didn't seem interested in his fortune. And it was precisely this authenticity that began to transform his feelings. One evening, as they were talking on the porch, looking at the illuminated city, Nathaniel remarked, "Do you know what I admire most about you, Emily?" She laughed, suspiciously. "On me? I don't know if there is much to admire." He turned to her, seriously. "I admire you because you still have strength. Even after everything. You haven't given up on being who you are." Her eyes filled with tears, but Emily turned her face away, not wanting to show weakness. "I'm not strong, Nathaniel. I just survived." He looked at her in silence, feeling the weight of those words. And at that moment she realized that it was no longer just about helping her. He was falling in love. But Nathaniel still had no idea that that choice, to open his home and his heart to Emily, would shake not only his personal life, but also his public image, his business, and even his relationships with people close to him. The trial would begin soon. Gradually, the days turned into a new routine for Emily. She no longer woke up scared every morning as she did on the streets. The comfort still seemed strange to her, but the body began to accept rest, and the soul, little by little, too. Nathaniel maintained a gentle posture. He offered, but never forced. He invited, but never demanded. By the third week, he decided it was time to take it a step further. "I want to introduce you to someone," he said one Friday night as they dined together on the rooftop. Emily looked at him suspiciously. "Who?" "My sister, Claire." Emily froze. The idea of meeting someone in his family made her panic. "No, Nathaniel. I can't." "Yes, you can." He reached over the table, trying to calm her down. "Claire is different. She won't judge you. Trust me." Despite her fear, Emily eventually gave in. On Saturday afternoon, Claire arrived. She was a woman in her early 30s, elegant, sweet-spoken, but attentive. When he saw Emily, he didn't hide his surprise, but he didn't make any mean comments either. "So you're Emily," he said, holding out his hand. Emily squeezed lightly, embarrassed. "I am." Nathaniel watched the two anxiously. Claire smiled, trying to break the tense atmosphere. "My brother never brought anyone here. You must be special." Emily had no reaction, but that welcoming gesture caused a small flame of hope to be born inside her. After the visit, when Claire left, Emily asked Nathaniel, "Why did you tell her about me?" "Because you're part of my life now." She was silent, her heart pounding. In the following days, the rapprochement between them intensified. Long conversations on the porch became routine. Spontaneous laughter erupted between simple meals, and Nathaniel began to discover in Emily a sweet, fragile, but also incredibly strong side. On a rainy night, after a conversation about childhood, the eyes crossed in a different way. The silence between them was no longer uncomfortable, but loaded with something new. Nathaniel approached slowly, respecting her every space. "Emily." She knew what was coming, and, even scared, she didn't turn away. When his lips touched hers, it was as if the whole world had fallen silent. Emily walked away quickly, frightened. "That's wrong. I don't belong to your world." Nathaniel lightly touched her face. "Who says you have to belong to some world? I just want you to be by my side." Tears filled Emily's eyes. All his life, he had been invisible, disposable. And suddenly, someone said that it was enough. That night, Emily didn't return to the guest room. But the outside world would not take long to notice. The following Monday, Nathaniel took Emily to lunch at a low-key restaurant on the Upper East Side. The intention was simple, to spend time together outside the penthouse. But the moment they entered, their eyes turned to them. Elegantly dressed women whispered at the next tables. A waiter disguised his expression of strangeness, but let out a look of judgment. Emily noticed everything, and each look was like a stab. "I shouldn't be here," he whispered, trying to get up. Nathaniel held his steady hand. "You have every right to be here. Don't let anyone make you believe otherwise." His security made her stay, but the experience left marks. On the way back, Emily was silent, her eyes fixed on the car window. A few days later, notes began to appear on gossip blogs. Who is the mysterious woman seen with Nathaniel Turner? Billionaire heir appears in public with a companion of dubious origin. Emily read it in secret, embarrassed. When Nathaniel realized, he took the cell phone from her hands. Don't read this. They are just people who live by destroying others. But it's about you, Nathaniel, she replied, her voice breaking. It's tarnishing your image. He took a deep breath, holding her chin so she could look at him. I don't care about the image. I care about you. But Emily knew that his world was made up of appearances, contracts, and reputations. And sooner or later, the pressure would be unbearable. The first to speak out was Michael Reynolds, a partner at Turner Properties and a close friend of the family. Nathaniel, he said in a private meeting, you are making a serious mistake. Your relationship with this woman can compromise agreements, drive away investors. You need to think with your head. Nathaniel kept his cool. I already thought, Michael, and I'm going to continue with her. Rather crooked looks, they would be at stake. The following weeks were intense. Emily was trying to adapt to a life she had never imagined. New dresses arrived in discreet bags, chosen by a stylist hired by Nathaniel. She accepted, but always with a certain discomfort. She still felt out of place, as if, at any moment, she would be expelled from that scenario. However, there was something undeniable. Nathaniel never tired of being by her side. He took her to restaurants, to night walks around the city, to more private events. But every time someone recognized the couple, mean comments spread. On the internet, the rumors gained strength. She has no past. He's probably after his money. Another fortune hunt in disguise. Emily read in secret, cried silently, and tried to convince herself that she didn't care. But he did. One night, while they were having dinner on the penthouse, she blurted out, Nathaniel, you don't understand. The whole world respects you. You were born in this prominent place. Not me. For them, I'll never be enough. He put down his fork, looked her in the eyes, and replied, For me, you're more than enough. Tears streamed down her face, and Nathaniel pulled her into a hug. But deep down, Emily feared that his words would not be enough to face the weight of reality. Not long after, Emily began to feel awkward. Nausea in the morning, dizziness, fatigue. At first, she thought it was just stress or anxiety. But when the symptoms persisted, Claire, Nathaniel's sister, insisted on taking her to a doctor. In the waiting room, Emily trembled. I had never had adequate medical follow-up. Exams, consultations, everything was new to her. Claire held his hand, conveying calm. Minutes later, the doctor appeared with a discreet smile. Congratulations, Emily. You are pregnant. The words echoed in the air like thunder. Emily widened her eyes, put her hand to her mouth, and felt the world spin. Claire, on the other hand, shook her hand tightly. It'll be all right, he said softly. But Emily didn't know if she would stay. When Nathaniel found out, the reaction was immediate. He entered the room, where Emily was crying lying on the bed, and knelt before her. We're going to have a child. Nathaniel, no. Her voice came out choked. This will destroy your life. No, Emily. It will give meaning to it. She stared at him, surprised. Do you really want this child? He smiled, his eyes teary. More than anything. Emily cried again, but this time with relief. The news, however, did not remain a secret for long. Someone from the clinic leaked the information, and soon the tabloids printed. Heir to Turner Properties will be a father. Mysterious mother in focus. The press was divided between curiosity and scandal. Some more sensationalist newspapers even called her the woman of the streets who conquered the millionaire. Emily felt shame, anger, and fear all at the same time. The first serious confrontation came from Michael Reynolds, Nathaniel's business partner. He entered his office without knocking, throwing a newspaper on the table. This is a disaster. A complete disaster. Nathaniel took a deep breath. I'm not going to discuss this with you, Michael. You need to understand, said the partner, exasperated. This woman will ruin your career, your image, your family's company. Who do you think would want to sign contracts with someone who gets involved in this kind of scandal? Nathaniel stood up, his tone firm. Whoever doesn't want to do business with me because of the woman I love doesn't deserve my time. Michael was flabbergasted. You're throwing away everything your father built. Nathaniel approached him, his eyes cold. My father taught me to be a man of character. If you can't understand this, maybe it's you who doesn't belong to that company. Michael stormed out, but the tension was just beginning. Emily, for her part, felt more and more pressured. Comments on the street, looks in restaurants. Even the penthouse employees watched her with a mixture of pity and judgment. One morning, sitting alone on the porch, she caressed her still discreet belly and whispered, "I don't know if I can." Nathaniel appeared behind her, placing a coat over her shoulders. "You're not alone, Emily. It will never be again." She cried again, this time allowing herself to believe a little more. But while the love between them grew, the siege also closed. Investors pressured, newspapers attacked, and Michael seemed willing to do anything to push her away. And Emily, even unintentionally, began to feel the weight of being the weakest link in this silent war. What she didn't know was that behind so many trials, there was something much bigger about to be revealed, something that would completely change the way she saw Nathaniel, herself, and the child she was carrying. Ethan's house, which had once seemed just an empty palace surrounded by security guards and silence, now took on another life. The days have become lighter since Claire started living there. It wasn't just her presence in herself, but the way she changed spaces. The living room, which had previously had expensive and cold furniture, now received simple flowers in a repurposed glass vase. The kitchen, rarely used, smelled of fresh coffee in the morning. The sound of Claire's laughter echoed through the hallways, breaking the heavy silence that had accompanied the mansion for years. Ethan, for the first time in a long time, felt that he had a home, not just a home. His routine, once marked by endless meetings and social obligations, was now filled with moments of simplicity. He found himself coming home early from work just to have dinner with her, even if it was an improvised dish with what she found in the pantry. Claire also seemed to flourish, although she still kept a look of suspicion at certain moments, as if she was afraid that all this was temporary. Little by little she relaxed. He began to risk playing on the old piano in the living room, even though he didn't really know how to play, drawing smiles from Ethan with his clumsy attempts. And on Sundays, he insisted on cooking something that reminded him of his childhood, even if it was often a simple recipe like a vegetable stew. To the eyes of those who looked from the outside, it seemed that they lived a modern fairy tale. But deep down, there was an unspoken silence between the two, the fact that Claire was pregnant. Although they were both happy with the news, this detail brought up insecurities that they did not share out loud. Ethan wondered, on his sleepless nights, if Claire really loved him or if the baby was the only thing holding her there. I also thought about what the world would say when they found out that a young millionaire had impregnated a woman on the street. The newspapers would not be kind, and he knew that his family and associates would put pressure on him. Claire, on the other hand, had her own fears. As much as she was falling in love with Ethan, she feared it was just a temporary episode in his life. She remembered, with pain, all the time she was discarded by the people she trusted. She wondered if, after the baby was born, Ethan would not decide to solve the situation by offering money and pushing her away for good. These insecurities were never said out loud, but were there, surrounding the two of them. One day, on a rainy afternoon, Ethan took her to see a property on the outskirts of Boston. It was a country house, simple compared to the mansion where they lived, but with a vast plot of land and trees that swayed in the wind. "I thought," Ethan said, holding her hand as they walked along the wooden porch, "that maybe we could raise our son in a place like this, away from the cameras, the looks, the people who always have something to say. Here, just the three of us." Claire was silent for a while, staring at the rain-soaked landscape. The idea was tempting, but it also seemed too good to be true. "Do you really believe we can live like this?" she asked, in a tone that mixed hope and distrust. Ethan stared at her sincerely. "I believe we can build anything together. I don't want you to just be the mother of my son, Claire. I want you with me. Always." Those words touched her deeply. For the first time, he began to believe that maybe it wasn't just a phase, that maybe he really saw it as something more than a passing story. But as Ethan made plans for a discreet and happy future, outside forces moved. The news of the pregnancy began to circulate discreetly among close acquaintances. One of Ethan's partners, Richard Coleman, had already heard rumors, and was not happy at all. For him, this wasn't about love or family, but about business. The presence of Claire, a woman with no stable past, threatened the reputation of the company they built. What if the media found out? Investors could react badly, and Richard would not allow the company's image to be tarnished by what he considered a personal mistake by Ethan. While Claire and Ethan hugged on the porch of the cottage, dreaming of a quiet life, Richard was already preparing his own moves. He had power, contacts, and wouldn't hesitate to use them to get Claire out of the way, quietly but effectively. And it was in this apparent calm, in this beginning of hope, that the shadow of the turnaround began to form. What seemed like a fairy tale about to take hold was, unbeknownst to them, on the verge of being tested in the cruelest way. That morning started differently. Jonathan woke up early, but couldn't get out of bed right away. He lay there for a few minutes, staring at the ceiling, feeling a strange restlessness that he could not explain. Emily was still asleep, breathing calmly beside her. Her womb was already betraying the advanced months of pregnancy, and Jonathan always thought it was a particular miracle. But something bothered him, as if there was a shadow hanging over that peace. He decided he needed to distract himself and went to the office. He turned on his computer and started sorting through some late emails, but one of them caught his eye. It was from an old contact from his father's company, someone he hadn't seen in years, but who said he had important information about the woman you brought into your life. Jonathan froze when he read that. At first, he thought about ignoring it. It seemed invasive, even disrespectful. Emily had never given him reason to suspect anything, but curiosity was stronger than reason. The email left a phone number and asked him to call. After struggling with himself, Jonathan decided to call. On the other side, a hoarse, male voice replied, "Jonathan, I knew you were going to look for me." He was silent for a few seconds before replying, "Who are you? What do you mean by information about Emily?" The voice sighed, "My name doesn't matter. I just want you to know that the woman you think you know isn't exactly who she seems to be. Search the state system for the name Emily Parker. You will understand." Before Jonathan could react, the call dropped. He tried to return, but the number no longer existed. His heart raced. He paced back and forth in the office, hands in his hair, not knowing what to do. He felt that he should not touch it, that he should trust Emily and forget that strange voice. But at the same time, there was anguish burning inside, asking for answers. Finally, he did not resist. He opened the public criminal record system and typed Emily Parker. What appeared before his eyes made him freeze in his chair. There was an arrest record. A few years earlier, Emily had been arrested for shoplifting at a convenience store. Jonathan read and reread those lines as if his eyes were playing a trick. The photo in the record was undoubtedly hers. Younger, more haggard, but still Emily. Jonathan ran out of breath. She felt the weight of a doubt she had never imagined carrying. He had opened the doors of his life, his home, and his heart to Emily, never questioning where she had really come from. Now, the trust seemed to have been broken by something he didn't even know how to process. He decided that he needed explanations. That night, when Emily was already sitting on the couch, resting with a cup of tea in her hands, Jonathan approached slowly. His gaze was heavy, loaded with conflicting feelings. "Emily," he began, his voice lower than usual. "I need to ask you something, and I want you to be honest with me." She looked up, worried. "What's wrong, Jonathan?" He took a deep breath. "Who are you, really?" Emily looked confused for a moment. "I am me, Jonathan. I saw." He hesitated. "I saw a record. An arrest record. Emily Parker, arrested for theft. It was you." The silence that followed was almost unbearable. Emily dropped the cup on the table with trembling hands. Her eyes filled with tears instantly. "I knew this day would come," she murmured, her voice breaking. Jonathan felt the ground disappear beneath his feet. "So is it true?" Emily took a deep breath, wiping away tears with the sleeve of her blouse. She began to speak, her voice broken with emotion. She said that years ago, when she was still living on the streets, desperate for food and with no one by her side, she had stolen packets of bread and milk from a convenience store. It was winter, and she had not eaten properly for days. She was caught red-handed and spent a few days in jail. but was released on parole. The shame was so great that he was never able to get back on his feet. She carried the weight of that mistake, which threw her even deeper into life on the streets. "I never wanted to hide it from you," she said, crying. "But I was afraid. Fear that if you knew, you wouldn't look at me the same way anymore. I'm not that criminal record, Jonathan. I'm someone who made a mistake when I was desperate." "Is that it?" Jonathan felt his heart tighten. He looked at Emily and saw the woman he loved, the mother of his future child, but the revelation still throbbed inside him like an open wound. Part of him wanted to hug her and say that nothing changed what he felt. Another part felt betrayed, deceived. He did not immediately respond. He got up and walked to the window, looking at the night falling over the city. Emily was silent, waiting for a reaction that never seemed to come. After long minutes, Jonathan said only, "I need to think." And he left the room, leaving Emily alone on the couch, tears streaming down her face. The turnaround had happened, and from then on, nothing would be the same. The silence inside Ethan's house that night seemed to carry weight. His every step sounded too loud against the wooden floor, and every breath came laden with questions he couldn't answer. He had just come out of a difficult conversation with Natalie, and he could still feel the vibration of her words in his chest. The doubts that arose in his mind didn't disappear at dawn, they just turned into a denser restlessness, something he knew he couldn't just ignore. Over the next few days, Ethan began to notice things that had previously gone unnoticed. The way Natalie sometimes looked away when he talked about the future. The way she avoided mentioning details from the past, as if she were always building a careful narrative. With each remark, he wondered if he was being paranoid or if there really was something she was hiding. One Sunday, after breakfast, while Natalie tended to the plants in the yard, Ethan sat on the porch with a cup of coffee. The crisp autumn air brought the smell of dry leaves scattered on the ground. He watched her there, kneeling, her hands covered in dirt, smiling at a small sapling she was planting. The scene seemed so ordinary, so peaceful, that he felt torn between the calm of that moment and the turbulence he carried inside. But the doubt was like a thorn in the side, small, but impossible to ignore. On Monday, he called his trusted lawyer, Thomas Graham, an older, experienced man who had been taking care of the family's legal matters for years. Ethan didn't explain all the details, only saying that he needed a discreet investigation into Natalie, where she came from, if she had any history, something that might have been hidden. Thomas didn't ask too many questions, just agreed to work out whatever was necessary. Ethan, however, was left with a tightness in his stomach. He felt guilty, as if he was betraying Natalie's trust while seeking to protect the future they were building together. Meanwhile, Natalie seemed more and more connected to her new life. She decorated small corners of the house, cooked recipes that she said she had learned by herself, and spoke fondly about the baby that grew inside her. One night, lying next to Ethan, she took his hand and placed it on his belly. "Do you feel it?" he asked, with a twinkle of emotion in his eyes. Ethan closed his eyes, trying to concentrate, and suddenly felt a gentle movement, like a slight touch from the inside out, that moved him in a way that no doubt could erase. A lump of emotion tightened in his throat, and he responded only with a shy smile. However, Thomas's investigation brought the first answers days later. He called Ethan, asking them to meet in person at his office. Ethan's heart raced. When he got there, Thomas was serious, with a folder of documents on his desk. "Ethan, I don't want you to take this as judgment, but you need to listen calmly," said the lawyer, opening the briefcase. "Her real name is not Natalie Collins. She has used at least 2 other names in different registers. And there is a history of passages through women's shelters and community clinics in different cities." Ethan felt the world spin for a moment. The words echoed in his head like a distant bell. He didn't know if he should be furious, scared, or just confused. "What about the baby?" he asked, almost voiceless. Thomas took a deep breath. "There is nothing to indicate another person involved. The pregnancy is too recent for any doubt in this sense. But there is an important point. I found evidence that she was running away from someone. We don't know who, but she switched identities more than once in a short period of time." Ethan ran his hand over his face, trying to organize his thoughts. The memory of Natalie smiling in the backyard, her hands in the dirt, seemed so distant now. When he returned home that night, he found her preparing dinner. The smell of garlic and onions filled the kitchen. She smiled as she saw him enter, as if nothing in the world could shake that moment. Ethan, however, felt the weight of the secret he carried. He said nothing. Not that night. He decided to wait. I needed to hear from her own mouth what was really happening. But there was one thing he knew. His life would not be the same after that discovery. Spring has come to Boston like a breath of hope, bringing with it flower-filled streets, parks packed with families, and an air of fresh start looming over the city. For Matthew and Sarah, that period seemed to reflect exactly what they lived inside. The house, once silent and marked by his loneliness, now pulsated with life. The crying at dawn, the awkward laughter of Matthew trying to lull his daughter, the heat of the sunny days when Sarah went out with the stroller for a walk. All this formed a routine as new as it was intense, but deeply meaningful. Still, behind the joys, Matthew carried a constant worry. He knew that the twist in Sarah's past was still alive. The story with her parents, the difficulties, life on the streets. None of that could simply be erased. Sarah Hing was still haunting her. It was one of these early mornings that Matthew approached, put his hand on her shoulder, and asked softly, "Sarah, what's happening?" She took a deep breath, trying to hold back her tears. "I'm afraid, Matt. Fear that one day all this will end. Fear that someone from my past will come back to get me out of here." He knelt before her, held her hands, and spoke firmly. "Sarah, no one is going to take anything away from you. You are not alone." But deep down, he was also afraid. He feared that that past would come back with force and hit them like an unexpected storm. A few weeks later, this fear took shape. A brown envelope was delivered to the house, without a sender. Sarah opened it with trembling hands and found inside it a letter signed by a figure she never expected to see again. Harvey Collins, the lawyer who, years ago, had represented her mother in a custody case. The letter said Sarah's mother was seeking rapprochement. Sarah was in shock. This woman had given up on her when she was still a teenager, choosing to go with an abusive partner instead of protecting her. It was after this that Sarah ran away from home and began her life on the streets. The thought of meeting her again seemed unbearable. Matthew, seeing his wife's reaction, felt his stomach turn. "You don't have to see this woman if you don't want to, Sarah." But she, after days of reflection, replied, "I must face this. Not for her, but for me." The meeting was arranged in a discreet cafe, away from the center. Sarah arrived with Matthew next to her, but asked him to stay at a distant table, just watching. She wanted to face that moment alone. When her mother entered, Sarah hardly recognized her. His aged face, marked by time and vices, contrasted with the memory he kept. The woman looked fragile, but her eyes still carried the same hardness as before. "Sarah," said the mother, her voice trembling, "you have lost the right to this." The mother took a deep breath and began to talk about regret, mistakes, a desire to get closer to her granddaughter. He said he was undergoing treatment, that he had changed, but every word seemed to weigh like lead. Sarah listened in silence, until she finally replied, "I don't know if I believe you. I fought alone when you turned your back on me. Now I have a family, I have a life, and I'm not going to let you destroy that." Matthew watched from afar, tense. He knew that this moment could define much of his wife's future. Sarah left the cafe without looking back, her eyes teary, but her posture firm. Outside, she fell into Matthew's arms and cried. "I did what I had to," she murmured. "But it hurts so much, Matt." He hugged her tightly. "You're no longer alone." The twist that was beginning to take shape was not only the unexpected return of Sarah's mother, but something even more complex. Harvey Collins, the lawyer, seemed to have other interests in that reappearance. Days later, Matthew received a court notice. Sarah's mother was filing a lawsuit to try to prove her daughter's emotional incapacity to raise the child, using her life history as an argument. The news fell like a bomb. Sarah became desperate, and Matthew felt an anger he hadn't experienced in a long time. It was clear that someone was manipulating that situation. Harvey Collins didn't seem to act only as a lawyer. There was something else behind, something dark and driven by interest. That night, Sarah held Matthew's hand and said, "I'm not going to lose my daughter, Matt, even if I have to face the whole world." He looked into her eyes and, with a firmness he rarely showed, replied, "Then let's face it together." The turnaround was just beginning, and they both knew that this fight would expose deep truths, old wounds, and secrets that could completely change the course of their lives. That dinner at Ethan's mansion marked the beginning of a new stage in the lives of all of them. There were no more secrets, no more tension hidden behind the luxurious walls of the house. The silence that had previously weighed down now gave way to voices of laughter, light conversations, and a sense that, despite the scars, they had managed to rebuild something that few would believe possible. Rachel no longer felt the woman on the street that he had taken home. She now saw herself as a mother, a companion, and, above all, as someone who deserved to be where she was. The weight of shame he carried at the beginning had disappeared, replaced by the certainty that his story had changed, not by luck, but by courage. Ethan, in turn, had transformed in a profound way. The man who had once sought to fill the void with luxury cars, parties, and risky deals, now found himself fully satisfied to wake up next to the woman he loved and hear the hurried footsteps of a child running around the house. The money she had was still part of her life, but it was no longer the reason for it. He had discovered that love and belonging were riches that could not be bought. Maya grew up surrounded by love. At school, she was known as the girl who always smiled, always offered help, and had an endless curiosity about the world. Ethan and Rachel had a constant concern to teach her that nothing they owned made them better than others. They wanted her to grow up knowing that human value was never linked to a bank account or the address of a house. The upheaval of their lives had become a topic in unexpected places. Many people in the city, who used to whisper about Rachel behind her back, began to change their attitude when they saw her determination to study, take care of her family, and help with social causes. Together, she and Ethan created a foundation aimed at welcoming homeless women, offering shelter, job opportunities, and education programs. Rachel never forgot the cold of the streets, the loneliness, and the fear. But instead of letting those memories destroy her, she turned them into fuel to prevent other women from going through the same thing. Ethan supported every step, putting resources and influence, but making it clear that the idea and heart of the project were hers. In the newspapers, the story was reported as the millionaire who fell in love with a woman on the street and changed his life. But inside their home, they knew that the truth was much more complex. It was not just a rescue, but a mutual transformation. Ethan had given Rachel a chance to start over, but Rachel had given Ethan something that no money had ever given him: purpose. Time passed. 10 years later, the mansion was no longer the center of the family's attention. They preferred to move to a simpler house, still comfortable, but much more cozy and practical. Maya, already a teenager, helped with the foundation's activities, talked to the women, played with the children who arrived with their mothers, and always said that their fathers were her greatest inspiration. On a sunny spring afternoon, Rachel was sitting in the garden, watching Maya study and Ethan tinkering with a small patch that he tried, without much success, to turn into a vegetable garden. She smiled to herself, remembering how it all began, how hard it had been to believe that she deserved that love. Ethan noticed her gaze and walked over, sitting down next to her. He held her hand and said, simply, "I thought I had rescued you. But, in fact, you saved me." Rachel did not immediately respond. She just leaned her head on his shoulder and was silent, enjoying the moment. Because she knew he was right. Their life wasn't perfect, but it was real, built with choices, falls, new beginnings, and above all, love. And so, what began as an unlikely meeting between a young millionaire and a woman on the street turned into a story of redemption, family, and hope. A story that proved that one's true value is never in where one starts, but in how one chooses to continue. And that's exactly what Ethan, Rachel, and Maya did. They kept going. Together, against expectations, against the past, against the looks of doubt. And in the end, they won.